gentlemen, welcome. I invite you to take a seat if there are any left. We're going to get underway. Hi, everybody. How's everybody feeling? Pretty good? Pretty great. All right. Well, my name is Matthew Evertsen. I'm founder of RONIN, a curation and creative management company dedicated to connecting artists, brands, and communities through content and live experiences like tonight's programming. I'd like to welcome you to New York Cannabis Summit Presents Entertainment Media and the Future of Cannabis Wellness. Our mission this evening is to discuss the media and entertainment industry's role in supporting the narrative of professionalism, entrepreneurship, and health and wellness in the hemp and cannabis industries. We want to orchestrate the continued transition for legal cannabis operators, their investors, professionals, and artists into mainstream culture. And I'm joined by an incredible group of panelists with me this evening. I'd like to begin with allowing them each to introduce themselves, starting with my lovely co-host for tonight's programming, Lola.
Hello. I'm Lola Langusta. I'm one of the founders of Stone Fox. We are a media company unapologetically fusing cannabis with fashion, lifestyle, and culture.
Hi. Hello. Is it up? Green light? Green light. Try again. Hello? Oh, there we go.
My name is Imran Hafiz. I am a strategist at Virtue, which is Vice's creative services agency. And I mostly work on brand strategy for bigger brands, but I'm very interested about some of what I'm seeing in the cannabis space. And I've got a background in cannabis and technology journalism at Vice for Weedikit and Motherboard at Vice.
I'm Will Kleidon, and I am the founder of Ojai Energetics. It's a cannabis technology company. We're a benefit corporation, and we work on delivery systems like water-soluble technology to supercapacitor batteries.
Hello, good evening. My name is Cristina Buccola, and I'm an attorney and an advocate in the industrial hemp and cannabis space. About half of my practice is dedicated to helping a variety of people in the business make smart business decisions, and then the other part is dedicated to economic justice and making sure that the legislation we pass is in fact the legislation we should be passing.
I am TK Wonder. I am an artist, rapper, writer. I have a twin sister who's here somewhere. We work a lot together in fashion. We're with IMG, and I am new to the supporting the cannabis, but I'm very vocal and advocating for legalization of marijuana. So I am green, no pun intended, to the side of it, but I'm excited to be here.
And you've prepared a piece. We'd be so grateful if you share that with us now.
Sure. When's the last time you heard someone killing because of the munchies? Assault weapons are legal. How backwards at times is this country? Marijuana misdemeanor still not expunged, and we have more rights and less meaner to extremists with guns. People of color in jail for less than an ounce of cannabis. Meanwhile, weed legal in some states converse these white panelists at conventions and talks. Don't hear too many balk on why those locked up for what's legal still do not walk. People got records for what is now legal, no, not right. Prison system, big business, profiting off those who not white, even when they paid the price. I'm tired of seeing people of color be sentenced for their race and not just their vice. Bush did cocaine, and yeah, there's evidence what you can get away with when white and rich. Look at the current president. Shit, not my president, fuck his wall. Praises misogynist, but not that man from the Waffle House, James Shaw. Condones supremacists with tiki torches. I'm black, I'm a woman. How could I ever, ever, ever support his choices? And I don't expect concessions from Jeff Sessions. The man thinks people who smoke weed are evil. How backwards is that confession? So we're all supposed to think that Rihanna and Willie Nelson are evil because smoke at their leisure. Some people give their kids cannabis because it's the only thing that stops their kids' seizures. You have people in remission talk about how cannabis mitigates the pain of their condition. And here's old heartless Jeff talking about his derision. Look how politicians act, ignore World War III, possibility, assault rifles and murder sprees, alienating everybody overseas. The minor drug offense go hard like hard with herb or weed. However want to call it, big business lining these pockets. Government made it legal, finally figured out how it can make a profit. Shit, not a profit, can see this coming a mile away. Injustice of it all, fuck it, I'm gonna go smoke a J.
Thank you, TK. Now, she illustrates much of the gravitas behind the plant and issues concerning that we need to address and correct in this country. And if any of our messaging is going to be effective, then the communication has to cut through. And we've seen more and more movie studios and networks and media outlets getting behind cannabis content. We have Chuck Lowry from famous Big Bang Theory is producing Disjointed on Netflix. Showtime had Weeds, CNN had High Profits, HBO has High Maintenance. The list of scripted and both non-scripted content goes on. Imran, if I could ask you about your experience working with the Students for Sensible Drug Policy and how that experience led to you being a fundamental part of Weedicate.
Yeah, well, Krishna Andabola, the host of Weedicate, was supposed to come with me tonight, so
is he
apologies
here?
for not making it. No, he had a family issue to deal with. But I basically he would corroborate this, but I basically got a job by smoking weed. And I come from a very South Asian family, and I think it helped that a few of the other people that I was looking up to in this world had similar challenges to deal with. I went to like a quote unquote good school. My parents, it was all about just getting into a really good school. And when I got there, I almost didn't get a chance to go because I was in a car with somebody and that person had cannabis on them, and we were stopped by the police, and I caught a charge sheet. And I don't know if you guys know this, but that is the single thing that you could get no scholarships for if you have a drug charge. You could be convicted of rape or murder and still be eligible for Pell Grants, but you can't go to college, or at least not have the government contribute towards it. So that was a huge wake-up call, and I won a scholarship and used it to pay a lawyer and got out of dealing with that. And thankfully my story didn't end there, but for many people it did, and it's worth remembering. But when I got to school, I was very invested in bringing an economic and public policy perspective on the drug war and trying to understand how we can frame these conversations in a way that a Rotary Club could wrap their heads around. My biggest issue with the legalization movement or the drug policy world, as I had seen it, was it wasn't shifting itself to fit the narratives that would be effective, as opposed to kind of doing what felt free. And ideally we'd live in a world where all of that is possible, but for me, trying to find those really analytical case studies, like the most interesting places to think about and talk about how drug policy interacts with our society, speaking to ex-DEA agents and bringing them to school. There's a wonderful organization called LEAP, which is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which is former cops and people in the law enforcement industry speaking out. It's like these are the arguments that I was interested in promoting, and at the same time I was interested in working in public policy, and I happened to be reading Weedicate, which was a column on Vice long before it was a show or even a video documentary series, and there was an article about how the author, who wrote under a pseudonym, couldn't find weed on tour when his punk band went on tour. And I did some cyber sleuthing and figured out who I thought he was on Facebook, and I reached out and I said, hey man, if you need to find weed and you're on tour in North Carolina, come find me. You can sleep on my couch and I'll find you a show, and also, are you looking for an intern? And to my complete surprise, the next day, I get a call from Abdullah Saeed, who is the founder of the Weedicate brand and also the host of Bong Appetit on Vice. And at the time, he was writing the Weedicate column, and he was amazed that I had found him. And he said, yes, you can be my intern, but you know how to you know that we smoke weed, right? And I was like, yes, you're talking to the best joint roller at Duke University. Okay? You know, and I had all of this research and this passion behind the legalization project that was driven from, you know, trying to understand the economic basis for what was going on. The fact that we've spent exponentially more on fighting a drug war, and yet drugs have only become cheaper, more plentiful, pure, and more available. So, you know, what exactly are we doing? I think, you know, one of the reasons I'm really passionate about working at Vice is I feel like there's more of there's less of a reason to be concerned about what the other media companies are talking about and saying, like, let's take a step back. You know, maybe this drug war thing is a bit of a boondoggle and a bad policy choice. And so that, you know, I had an internship with Abdullah and his bandmate Basim, who was working on something that Vice was doing with HBO, which turned out to be an Emmy Award-winning sending Dennis Rodman to North Korea, you know, Vice show. And every day we'd smoke weed in my Airbnb that was next to Vice, and sometimes you call the NSA, you know? And it was just this amazing synthesis of all of the things that I loved, this like punk rock attitude, this analytical thinking about the world, this critical thinking and applying some of these arguments that were designed not to make us feel good, but to be really effective in changing people's minds and hearts, and speaking to the other, and not resenting them quite so much. And I've tried to basically do that throughout my career, so I consider myself the luckiest guy I've ever met.
It certainly is a war against hearts and minds, and in the grand scope of things, I want to lean to Cristina on your vast experience in both hemp and cannabis, and also as serving for general counsel for High Times for a number of years. In the course of your career, what has been some of the most standout, successful campaigns and/or messaging that come to mind?
In no small part, right now, at this moment, I think we're at a critical point where the politics behind cannabis matter. And if I may, just if we look at cannabis and industrial hemp from a legislative standpoint, which is really boring, I'll try to make this short and interesting, and we just zoom out at 30,000 feet, what we see is that most of the legislation that's being forwarded at our federal level deals with either states' rights or some other kind of economic right, an economic right to treat a cannabis business so that it doesn't have the hardship of 280E, which is the section of the tax code that wreaks havoc on most cannabis businesses, or that cannabis businesses can access banking. That's a problem for me because I think cannabis legalization, first and foremost, is a civil rights issue. And we need to look at what has been done to communities over 80 years of prohibition that is based on utter bullshit, if I can just say that. So we need to not stop taking this from a position of economics. Economics will come, but first and foremost, we need to start thinking about this as how do we make sure that we build a cannabis industry that is inclusive. And those people who have been shut out and now are the bargaining chips in the horse trading that's going on in federal legalization, and aren't the ones with the deep pockets for the lobbyists to say, no, we have to make sure this makes it into our legislation. So this is the kind of part of my practice that I love, because no one pays me to do it, so no one can control my words, right? And I'm going to be there on record, and what I'm seeing now is with branding, some of the most powerful branding I'm seeing is around those people and those brands that are really taking stands. And I also want to warn everyone to go beyond the 140 characters of Twitter and go beyond the press releases, because you'll see that there's big money out there, and this big money is saying, look, we have an expungement clinic. That's great. Expungement is necessary for any and all legislation. But does it go further? Are you actually encouraging the legislature to look at real social and economic justice issues? When what I mean by economic justice issues is there a path for ownership in this new cannabis industry for communities that have been historically been shut out of or imprisoned on account of cannabis? So that's number one. Is part of that taxation being taken out and reinvested into those communities that have suffered the hardest, right? And these are, so it's really important. There's a ton of money to be made. Don't worry about that. The money will come. But I'm really encouraging people, and back to your branding question, when brands are starting to take on the social and economic justice aspect of this, and really are in there with the legislative communities and saying, no, we need this, we need to fight for this, instead of being in the room and saying, well, I don't think that's really going to work, and undermining all of those efforts. We need to hold people accountable, and this big money that's coming in, hold it accountable. And don't stop asking, where's your money going? Who are you paying? Where do you stand on this issue? That is the best branding that can be done right now. That's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of brands, Will, I direct this next to you. If you educate us a bit about the Ojai philosophy, and also speak to how having athletes, celebrities, and members of the entertainment community on your board have impacted your brand's growth.
Awesome. So, yes, to everyone, it's critical, and I think with this plant in particular, it literally has been with us through every iteration for millennia, different situations, and it's been a relatively short but detrimental and deadly period of systemic racism policy driven by big business out of fear of essentially what happened with William Randolph Hearst. He owned the lumber industry. At that point, there was not an efficient means of making paper from hemp that could compete with lumber. And in 1936, the U.S. Department of Agriculture figured out how to do it. And so they partnered up with Asslinger and DuPont, and they said, how can we take something that's been part of, for millennia, culture's commonality, ubiquitous, and make it illegal, and as well. Essentially focused on racism and fear, and used that to create the best propaganda campaign and media campaign I think ever really pulled. And so the impetus, so with this plant in particular, I believe it's a feminine energy primarily, and she's the plant of abundance. And so she's also a warrior if you're looking at plant medicine, and she stings people, and if you're doing it out of integrity. So I think there's a beautiful kind of mechanism, and we're going to see that to address a lot of these people who are jumping in, and all they're caring about is the bottom line. It's not the essence of, and it's not going to sustain. But it's crucial to be vigilant and to take action, like you're saying, to ensure that the right groundwork is being laid in this emergent economy, and next iteration of her coming back into the scene. So I founded the company as a public benefit corporation. The impetus for starting it was I was looking for high CBD, and I thought I had to get it at a dispensary. I Googled it and saw it was on Amazon, and I was like, it's CBD on Amazon. This is 2013. And I ordered it, and it showed up in my mailbox, and I was like, this is crazy. So I did some due diligence, and there was a loophole of stock and stem from non-domestic ground cannabis at that point. That's what the origins of the CBD side of the industry. And so, but it was filled with heavy metals. It was imported from China. There was no C of A. I couldn't figure out what I was taking, and so I was searching for something that I felt comfortable putting in my body that was grown in integrity and with clean and transparent, and it wasn't there. So that was the impetus of starting the company. And simultaneously, I wanted to create a vehicle because I believe we're living right now in a renaissance of consciousness. We've got more convergence of edge and multiple different paradigms coming together than ever before through the internet, and I believe we've hit a critical mass, and so everyone is beginning to wake up and hunger for this next iteration of symbiosis as opposed to parasitic consciousness, and it's vital for us to continue to live, and I believe it's inevitable if we continue the path that we're on to do properly. But we need to stay vigilant, right, and have fun, right. So it was created as a public. So I wanted to basically. There's all these amazing ideas and visions that people are having right now. Yet there was. I wanted to create a vehicle that would be beyond just economics, but to also generate economic flow, because money is energy. to then be able to pipeline that into systemic vehicles for change and symbiotic iterations of the next level that everyone is collectively, not everyone, but majority, I believe at this point, at least in their unconscious, is dreaming of.
Yeah. But we got to take responsibility for the image and the messaging that
100%.
we want to see.
And to hear people talking about the necessity and the hypocrisy of people coming in based on a artificial systemic racism that's made up, that has specifically generated money by incarcerating individuals of no risk to generate slave labor, essentially, right? And so many are now, this very people who were pushing for that are now seeing the economic drive and wanting to get it. But at the same time, because of the internet, we live in such a fascinating time where we can now counteract that and be extremely poignant. And so it's vital, right? And so that's, and so part of it, from the beginning, getting into this, I was aware of that, and so when I find the right group, and it sounds like you're sitting next to me potentially, I wanted to pipeline capital that we generate specifically to go to criminal justice for people incarcerated, particularly people of color, for cannabis crimes, because I do not think that it is, as you said in your flow, it is not. It's just the right thing, and it's vital to actually come forth and go into the next symbiotic stage.
We can't move forward until that.
Absolutely cannot. And you can't change something unless you accept it exists. And that's where people are. It seems like we're going backwards, yet I believe we're just moving on a spiral, and it's going from being hidden to going out into the surface. And so it's just when you start a detox, the toxins are buried deep within, but as you start to get healthier, they start to move to the surface, but it becomes louder, and you feel it more, and you think you're getting sick, but in fact you're actually moving towards health. And so now is more than ever we must be vigilant, because it's dangerous, right? But it's in the surface, but it's actually treatable. It's not like what we're seeing in this realm and geopolitical scope right now. It's not. This stuff has been there for people of color. Like, it's not like it's and everyone, socioeconomic warfare on every level. From we are at a transitionary point, right? But it's not that that it's new. It's that it's become, people are becoming aware of it, and it's coming to the surface, which means now is the time to act and address it. And so through media and through proper business that is designed for, so our core, like in the founding documents of, I believe we're the first public benefit corporation in the hemp and cannabis space. And so in the core charter, we wrote that we are bound legally to be of service of all life, including the planet, through every project, venture, pathway that we take, period. And so I believe that is the future model of where people we will not make a decision based on, we're not legally bound if we went public, but we're probably going to do an ESOP. But anyways, we can make a decision based on social and environmental wellness, not based on profit. And I think that by people are choosing those companies over other things for the right reasons, and for the companies who don't get it, the market will force them to get it. And so that's where.
But I think to that point, it's worth, like, I think we need a Manhattan Project for this shit.
Yes.
You know, like, I think we need to get all the right people, and this is maybe a piece of it,
This
right?
is the
Like,
beginning,
this is the beginning of that. But my fear is that we'll have, like, the Tom's shoes of cannabis. You know, like, I'm in.
Yes, and so that's
there's
where.
a lot of people here that are from, like, the creative world, and, you know.
Agreed.
To your point,
100%.
like, we made this bet. Like, it was Bernays, and it was like media and advertising for the powers that be that created the situation. So we have to own up to that.
Well,
that's our responsibility.
That's what
But it's also, you know, we can create some industry guidelines that, you know, people have to abide by, which is not greenwashing.
Yes.
In both, where, like,
100%.
you know, both of the bad ways.
And I believe that just the people who are making, through art and entertainment, is the way to, one of the key ways
to drive that culture and to bring awareness to it, and then keep the pressure on it, because you're gonna get greenwashing, yet people are getting more intelligent, and through proper media and influence, you can drive the consumer to dig deeper, and people are digging deeper more than ever before, especially millennials, but in every generation.
Yeah, well, that's perfect segue to my next question. Lola, as someone who is the operator and owner of a media outlet, taking responsibility for the imagery and the stories you want to be told, when did you first realize that opportunity for Stone Fox? And what are your goals with the imagery that you're creating?
Well, we started Stone Fox, honestly, was simply out of passion for our just creating, how we create. And cannabis is, I'm a novice smoker, I'm a firm believer. Pretty much what everybody's saying, cannabis to us really truly is, it's a teacher, it's a healer, it's a lover, and it's without bias. And that is our foundation. And for us, it wasn't really just an opportunity, it felt like a social and ethical awakening. And we have a chance now to shape-shift our fashion culture, just how we consume. And so it was that was really exciting, and I think the overall idea to create what we were creating came with not really, but finding an identity with cannabis media that was out there. A lot of it really cannabis culture tends to lead more towards a stoner identity, and we wanted to create something that was inclusive.
More high fashion and...
It's not really even just about fashion. I mean, it's beyond that, and we're going to get there. It's just, that's where we started with what we had.
Sure.
But no, it's about it's about opening up the conversation and making people curious, because we want people to get curious about cannabis and all of its healing benefits, because it's an awakening. I mean, people need to know. It's been made legal. All of the drugs that have been made legal are actually the healers. Right. And the FDA is out here pumping us with all these drugs that are turning us into zombies, killing us, doing all of these things. And now this is a people's revolution, and we can't let them take that from us.
Well said.
And they can't.
It's about being visible. It's about inclusion and representation. TK, I wanted to ask you earlier, you mentioned Rihanna and Willie Nelson, two very long time and public supporters. You, a new ambassador to the plant. Can you share your thoughts on folks with the profile being able to speak towards this end of prohibition?
First, let me just say yes, 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 4 yeses for everything that's being said up here right now. I think that I like the idea of people being vocal for the legalization of marijuana, but I like to see the other side of the conversation where we address the dichotomy between people who legally sell and grow and those from marginalized communities that have records for selling and growing something that's legal now. Proposition 64, you guys find Proposition 64 in California, they have provision that people can seek to have their records expunged. But San Francisco district attorney has said that he was going to have an automatic expungement for people that had marijuana misdemeanors, and look into reducing sentences for people that had non-violent drug offenses. If people don't know, it's a costly and timely process to have your record expunged. So, in my opinion, these people just need to have their records expunged automatically. The first 6 months, my mom lives in Nevada, so it's the reason why I know all this. But the first 6 months in Nevada that we became legalized, the state made $30 million in taxes. That's crazy, first 6 months. So the government's finally figuring out how that they can profit off of it, and at the same time, they're profiting off the prison system, keeping people that have records for non-violent drug offenses, for less than an ounce of cannabis. There's people in jail, this is a reality. So I think that when people support the cannabis, I think that we need to have these conversations. That's why I love to hear and agree with everything that everyone had to say, because I feel like that conversation is not prevalent enough. So when people do support it, I would like to hear more conversations like this.
Yeah. And it's also really quick, it's also more than just it being expunged for cannabis, because even when they put you out and it's still on your record, the system is set up to fail. it's set up to fail. So if you miss your parole or anything like that, I mean, it's just
Cash bail.
You're getting back. You're being put back in jail for literally never needing to be there in the first place. So it's just keeps going on, and
This is so
until we bring each other together and educate and have the ammunition to make policy change, right? It's like our goal is to reverse the stigma that has taken 80 plus years of effect, and how do we get to welcome communities who have not only been persecuted but also alienated because of this plan. I think again that's the responsibility falls on not only ourselves and the members of our communities respective to whatever industry we participate, but in sharing this information to the general public so that we can also now be empowered when we leave here to know the differences of the stories that we're talking about and the things that we're sharing.
If I could just say one more thing about that. Everyone in this room is some kind of cannabis ambassador, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So having a critical view into this topic is so important. It is about freeing the plant. It's about freeing the prisoners who have been in prison because of the plant. And it's about freeing economic opportunities. Yap, yap, yap. Here she goes again. But to really create an inclusive industry and to really have that representation, it means ownership across the board of people, all the types of people you see here, all the types of people who are out there. And it also means ownership for people who do have criminal records for growing the plant, for servicing this industry, who may have have led to be some vertebrae in the backbone of the cannabis industry. None of those people can be left behind.
Yes.
We can clap for that. You can clap. We can clap for that.
And one thing today,
I want to vote. That's awesome.
Can we vote for Cristina? Are you running?
I'm not, but I want everyone to be really, really awake about the legislation. For example, here in New York, we have a great piece of legislation that really can set us apart. I mean, this is something that makes me proud to be a native New Yorker, right? We have something called the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. And this has some of the most comprehensive programming about community reinvestments acts from taxation, which will be on a grant program from those communities who say, my community needs this. Yeah. Because they're in the best place to tell the revenue board what they need. It has to do with reducing all sentencing, and it has to do with, we got to expunge these records as well, but also ownership. There has to be some path to ownership so that it's not just all white men dominating the industry. All due respect.
All due respect. There's a huge industry outside of the folks who have capital to invest in cultivation.
But I also like that we have someone here on this is huge, that we have someone here on this board or on this panel tonight who is saying, yeah, I recognize that, and this is how my part is addressing your concerns and feeding into it. Everybody here, we all need to be part of this discussion.
We're in it together. Somebody told me the other day the opiate crisis doesn't affect them, and I had to slow down.
Oh my God.
Remind them that it affects all of us, whether it's in your front door or not.
And one note that is of importance today, I was on a call with the American Herbal Products Association, and one of the things we were addressing is in the current iteration of the Farm Bill.
I wrote an op-ed about this.
Thank you. We need to get.
So for those of you who don't know, the Farm Bill in 2014, it actually. All right, we're not gonna go down the CBD rabbit hole. I actually charge for that.
I'm gonna give you a 90-second timer.
But in any event, in the 2018 Farm Bill, there is this legitimization for industrial hemp. There is a small caveat to that says, hey, by the way, if you've ever been convicted of some kind of drug felony, you are not allowed to participate in this industry. Meanwhile, if you've gone and you've committed some kind of crime, if you've killed someone, if you've raped someone, if you've done a really heinous act, go ahead, come on in, process and cultivate. But if you have a drug conviction, felony, thank you, a drug felony on your record, you're out, can't participate.
And so additionally, they're going to be amending the U.S. Like a different act that will not be up for review until 2023. And so the issue is behind, essentially directly from, and it's beautiful to see, you've got Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer smiling and laughing about coming together to pass a bill to grow hemp everywhere. And it's a catalytic plan.
and that is progress, to see people coming together from both sides and enjoy. Now, that was not there until Senator Grassley came in. And so essentially, they call it the sausage making process because it's gross, but there's certain things that essentially from McConnell's office and Schumer's, they're saying that they cannot, if they want to pass it, they will not be able to pass it without that piece. And so we've come out and people are like, well, we don't even think it's going to make a difference. And so we made a vote. And I said, no, it's vital that we at least take a stand and come out and raise the alarm bells. If we cannot change it, and this needs to be a concession, but and essentially they're saying that they're going to pass it. So what we need to do is now apply public pressure through every channel of influence and through media and through culture to point, because they're literally stating that someone cannot farm a vegetable and own a business that's going to be treated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture because of a past drug crime that they've already paid their due. I mean, that is a slippery slope, and especially with this plan with the historical nature of the prosecution of people of color, particularly, and that was what was used to make it illegal in the first place, was racism. We need to jump on it, even if it doesn't change in this first iteration, like now. And so different channels, wherever you have that reach, it's vital to reach out.
Did you want to jump in before I move along?
Definitely. Before we move on, I want to speak to both of those things. So one of the first things is it's patently absurd that someone who has experience doing this thing is like suddenly not allowed to do it and someone else isn't, right? What's going on there? But the other thing is, what if we, again, had some sort of Manhattan Project for this and got together and said, okay, if you're going to go and make money doing this, you've got to have a certain proportion of formerly incarcerated people, not only on your staff, but holding stock. And
ownership,
and we can get there. And I don't know, what the answers are going to be, but I think it takes getting a few of the right people together and coming up with proximate goals. What is the first thing that we should be looking out to do that everybody can agree upon, and then what's the next thing? And just keep pushing up that ladder until we have a group of, like a cartel, of cannabis companies that want to go about this the right way, because it's not about what you buy, it's about what you buy into, and so I think our consumers are already on the same page, and I think even the biggest companies in the world fundamentally understand this, but the problem is we're very busy, we don't have a lot of time to actually do the needful and do the digging into what's going on. It's why we have public policy, it's why we have regulations, and it's why we self-regulate sometimes. And so I think this is on us as people, either in the media or the creative fields or in the cannabis space, to actually be saying like, okay, I know we're really busy, I know there's so many things to do, I know there's so many investors to talk to, but let's get together, let's put aside let's start with 1 week of the year, get together, go to a place, he can organize it, he's great with this kind of stuff, and we'll get the laptops out and actually sketch something out and get some experts involved.
Yeah,
I want to be there.
I was going to say, I think a number of those folks may be in the room with us now, and I know that we might want to leave some of this for questions. So I'm going to try to run through a few topics that I want to kind of cover before we have to open it up to the room for some questions. About 2 weeks ago, a company called Constellation, who's the owner of Can I get the question out? All right. I feel like you have something that you want to react to. I'm just interested in knowing, just very briefly, because I want to try to get through some of these last questions without sticking on too long. What do you guys feel like the impact of alcohol and the alcohol media, depending specifically how it dominates our culture here in America, how is that going to change as these brands and this money starts to come into the cannabis industry?
Can I jump? Yeah. So I think, especially with cannabis, right? We've got if we look at, so I studied permaculture design, and permaculture design is essentially common knowledge from indigenous cultures and people who are paying attention to the natural rhythms globally, right? And it's a systems design where you work in terms with nature's rhythms as opposed to against hers to generate regeneration and maximum output for minimum input in a nutshell. But it's essentially paying attention to the rhythms and going in harmony with as opposed to against.
And so part of that, one of the principles is the problem is the solution. So you apply that design technique. In the very problem is the seed and the solution to move it forward. And so looking at it from that perspective of okay, had we not have had the prohibition, none of us would be talking here today. It would be all patented, all Bayer, Monsanto, and genetically modified.
70 years ago.
Done and dusted.
Right.
There would be zero innovation, and there would be zero cultural drive. So the unique, I believe that plants have intelligence, way more than we can comprehend. And I believe, basically, by her pulling it back into the root system and in the underground, and essentially generating a culture of resistance and rebelliousness with integrity and intention. So like if you look at certain places where it's still extremely illegal, you have people who are willing to put themselves and their bodies at risk to give medicine, in some cases, to other people in need, and that's still happening across the world. And so essentially it generated an underground movement and energy and ethos that is unique to anything we see on the planet.
Way unlike alcohol.
Exactly. And so we're at this fascinating kind of precipice of now they need to get in, because in Colorado 30% of alcohol sales dropped since legalization. That's a lot.
That's a lot of money.
That's why Constellation put $4 billion in it, right? Now, but what's fascinating is that this is a very unique plant, and it's a completely different. It makes people think. It makes people question. It doesn't just numb and tune people out. And so there's an innate mechanism in there. Plus, people like no one is going to want to go and get a Monsanto joint.
Right.
Like people, there's an innate desire. Some people might, but majority of people want clean and organic, and people are beginning to push that forward and question and ask for that. And so in and of itself, I believe it's starting to drive and change that industry because the market and the culture that's existing will force it to.
Just by naturally the way it is.
Exactly.
Christina, did you want to? You were smiling so early on in the question.
I've got something.
Right. Go ahead, Imran. Yeah.
Look, the dirty secret of alcohol branding is that it's the same exact molecule. Like I work with a lot of alcohol brands, and they invest millions and millions of dollars into convincing you of the notion that tequila makes you crazy and wine makes you relaxed, and like it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing, and they've done all sorts of cool double-blind studies that actually test out this notion. But so much of our understanding of any sort of physiological chemical is our left brain sort of interpreting what's going on and post-rationalizing how we feel about the whole process. And there's so much money involved in convincing you that these things are different when it's the same thing. But the funny thing is, people have this view of cannabis that it's one thing, when it legitimately is lots of different things, and each one of those could be branded as any number of different things as well. So it's a bit weird and meta when you think about it that way, but it presents such a unique opportunity for growth on an economic perspective that's one of the, I think that is the tack to solving the civil rights problem. I love the way that you phrase it, the problem is the solution. We have this situation where the tech companies have done some really amazing things. They've had ridiculous growths, and secretaries are walking out with billion-dollar exits because they were in at the right time. I don't think that'll happen again in America. Because now if you're a tech company that's doing something really disruptive, you'll get bought out, and that's success for you. But the way that these companies got to where they were won't happen to them, I think, in the same way, because they are looking out for that. But cannabis, I think, is one of the only opportunities where it's illegal, and it has been illegal, and it's been the largest cash crop, more than every other cash crop in America put together. Despite that, so holy shit! Like there's so much money going around that, in my opinion, the only brands that will succeed in the long term are the ones that have like real restorative justice baked into them from the outset. And so if you are involved in the cannabis business, and if you are working on a startup or whatever it is, no matter what scale you are, it can't be lip service or like the whole Tom's bullshit. Sorry if you're here, by the way.
Or to anybody wearing Toms.
Yeah, well, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Do you? No?
Do it quick. Do it quick.
I'm gonna do this quick.
Okay.
So
Yes, thank you.
I gotta keep a timer. You gotta do it quick.
Got it. I totally agree with you, and but that's aspirational, right? That's hope, and you can't start or base any kind of strategy on hope, right? This is actual education, and so the way to do that is to actually codify it in legislation and in the rules. That's where we need it. We can be 100%.
I'd say,
Just wanted to add
I'd
that.
say both, right? Yes and. Like legislative push, culture push.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what
Martin-
I'm saying is the culture push, I love that everyone's here. There's more of a culture push than there is a legislative push.
Correct.
So
How do you
how do
do
we
that?
match up?
Yes.
The like you guys, I'm nobody. I'm the least interesting person on this panel. But everyone here has like a gajillion followers. So you could be like, hey, the next time you go into your dispensary, ask how they feel about this law or about this program. And people will listen to you. So that marriage of culture and questioning and education to get us there legislatively, I think that's your Manhattan Project.
Right.
TK, did you
Let me
want to?
just jump in here and say that being super informative is very interesting.
Thank
So you shouldn't sell
I
yourself
was
short.
gonna say, way more interesting than a picture.
She's been dying to use that line.
I am. I've actually been testing it out for like 24 hours. I'm gonna go.
All right. How are we doing on time? We got 10 minutes. All right. So before we get to, does anybody, just by a quick show of hands, does anybody have any questions? Are there any questions in the audience? There are. Okay. So before we get that, I want to allow you guys have some closing statements or some closing thoughts if you wanted to do that. I also wanted to thank everybody for being here. There is a raffle that we're going to give away some items on the roof after. If you can sign up in the back, it's through Baker. I want to give a shout out to Baker. I want to give a shout out to Rico. I also want to give a shout out to the National Diversity Inclusion of Cannabis Alliance, which is a group that he's behind. So when we're up here and we're talking about like, oh, these things, well, what does that mean? Where can I follow up with some more information? There are plenty of these organizations who you can donate your time and energy to in making a change and a difference. There are gift bags in the back. If you haven't gotten one, make sure you do before you leave. And before we open it up to questions, I'll just allow you guys to give a closing statement or thought, and then we can let the audience have at you. No pressure. Yeah, you can start.
No, I think just, well, for us, more or less, and I think for everybody, it's just really identifying who you are and what you believe in, and sticking with that no matter what. This, again, I can't say it enough. I really do feel like this is a people's revolution. We have an opportunity to literally change the way that we consume and just live our lives for the better. We all have the opportunity to operate at the highest level of being, and now this is a big awakening for us, and cannabis truly can help that. I firmly believe that. So I'm just grateful to be a part of this industry, and wherever it takes us,
And she's gonna regale us with some of her famous DJing on the roof later, so don't miss that.
I'll be on 10 to 1 for those that stayed late.
Imran?
Thank you so much for having me and for bringing us all together. I sincerely think that we are living the most exciting time that there is to be alive. You know, this man, before we started, gave me some drops from a thing, and he's, like a Willy Wonka of...
Yeah,
actually caught my
Ojai are in
ears.
all of your gift bags, by the
Me
way.
too, Elon
Ojai
Musk,
products are in all the bags.
This is... I think that I'm the luckiest person I've ever met, because I just think, I couldn't have imagined being here. And someone please take a picture so I can show my mom.
Has anybody...
I told you.
Yeah, we got it.
But genuinely, I really think this is how we're going to do this, is by creating these little pockets of change that, and I don't want us to leave feeling good about what happened tonight unless we've got some action items and next steps, and you meet some people that you're gonna work with, and so I certainly have my work cut out for me. And email me at imran@vice.com if you want to connect. Thank you.
Will?
Yeah, it's truly beyond words exciting. Like what we're experiencing a movement and an unfolding, really not seen before, because now we live on a more interconnected planet than ever, at least through physical technologies. So I 100% stand with mirror everything y'all are saying, and like the cannabis, I believe, is one of the most important catalysts to getting from a parasitic paradigm into a symbiotic one, where everyone is living in a regenerative manner together with equity. And what I find kind of beautiful and poetic about the plan is when you have we have this system. Every vertebrae has a system called an endocannabinoid system, and it's a terrible name, but essentially the system's job is to regulate homeostasis, which means maintaining balance and harmony with all of the separate parts as a one unit. And that's literally the function of this system for our body. It's arguably the most important system because it literally has receptors in every system, including down to the mitochondrial level and cell level, but it runs the show, essentially. It's the conductor for the body symphony. And we've artificially depleted this system by cutting out the micronutrients of cannabinoids that have historically been eaten by every population on the planet, minus the Inuit, for a period, which is interesting. But literally every culture had cannabinoid regular intake for thousands of years. It's one of the first plants we domesticated, and so we fed it as animal fodder. And Colorado did a study showing that eggs actually of chickens fed hemp flour, which was common practice for millennia everywhere. The eggs have up to 1% CBD content, which is an astounding amount of cannabinoids. So we've literally had these dietary intakes for millennia to feed the most important system of our body, and we artificially cut it out in the 40s. And one of the ways that it maintains homeostasis is through buffering oxidative stress. And so not only do we cut out the nutrients and artificially turn off that system, because we produce B vitamins in our body and our gut, but you also need to eat them. We produce cannabinoids in our body, but we also have evolved eating them. And it's no different. So we artificially cut that off while simultaneously increased all this oxidation. And so we 1-2 punched ourselves. And if you look at the maps of cancers and autism and diabetes and neurodegeneration, they go exactly hand in hand with what from the 40s. And so not all of it, but a huge chunk of it is actually nutrient deficiency, systemic nutrient deficiency. And so one of the ways, what's fascinating is when you put the nutrients back in, it turns the system online. And when you really activate the endocannabinoid system, it brings you out of being stuck in sympathetic nervous system, which is essentially like the 4 Fs, or fight or flight, and which the amygdala and other parts of the brain that makes people perceive things as other and threat. And then when you have a healthy endocannabinoid system, it actually literally turns on the parasympathetic response and increases the ability for people to see things as interconnected and one with each other. And that's where you come through synergistic work through. And then also it literally increases neuron production in the corpus callosum of the brain, which bridges both hemispheres of the brain, and also it increases the ability to see things as opportunities and working together. And what's fascinating, so that's happening at a cellular level and at a physical level in the body, but simultaneously we've got Republicans and Democrats coming together and passing a bill of joy. And so there's from micro level, and once you get your internal environment, and permaculture would be like ground zero online, you can't, it's like you can't help the person until you put the oxygen mask on first. So first we get ourselves into health. And another thing that, real quick, is that we've discovered that...
Like Bill Nye. Like meets Willy Wonka and Elon Musk. Like,
Willy Nye.
Holy shit. And Willy, you know? Like,
Will Nye.
We have a show. Let's make a show. Let's make a Bill Nye Weed by Slave show. You down? All right.
Awesome.
You got 30 seconds. Will.
Okay, so basically there's these studies, and they've replicated in double blind, but essentially the high CBD, low THC, but THC is vital for to have part of it. You need a full spectrum of cannabinoids, not just isolate. It's the symphony, not just the trumpet section. But essentially it will trim out selectively neural networks associated with traumatic stress and addiction. Addiction and traumatic stress are inherited through epigenetics, as well as basically the negative feedback loop that you were talking about is when it was part of it, is that essentially we've artificially created these negative feedback loops of trauma. And cannabis, when you get
the endocannabinoid system online can actually cut those neural networks selectively out while increasing neurogenesis to repattern the brain and rewrite the consciousness to then jump from a low energy feedback loop into a symbiotic one where everyone comes together. And we're working on, we've got the technology to help accelerate that.
It's a miracle. Cristina, no pressure, backing that up.
How do you follow that? So
Quickly.
That is the best answer on this panel this evening. To Matt, thank you for really putting this together.
You're welcome.
You really do pull an incredible group of people together that
And
you're not
Lola,
going to find.
Thank you, Lola, for putting this together
Yes,
too.
thank you. This is not a panel you see every day, so thank you to the both of you for putting this together. I just want to remind everyone here tonight how infinitely powerful that they are. And they are now a resource for education to go out there and teach more people about cannabis and what's at stake. And I want to reiterate that every legalization matter is wonderful, but there are some non-starters, and those non-starters ad nauseum, again, are expungement, ownership, community reinvestment. And without those three things, we shouldn't even be talking about cannabis legalization. So I'm going to leave you with that tonight. Thank you for being here.
TK, you started us, you might as well end us.
I would really like to see the stereotypical notions and antiquated associations with cannabis be eradicated. There was a study done that showed black people are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than white people, albeit the use is equal among the races. So I think we have a lot of work in changing the perception and the way that people view cannabis, and also recognizing its medicinal properties as well. There's a young lady named Chelsea Leyland, and she's talked a lot about marijuana and epilepsy. And I know that for some parents who are going through that, cannabis has been a tremendous help to them, and it's the only thing that's helped with their kids' fits and seizures. So I think we just need to change the dynamic and continue to have these conversations. And thank you for having me. And this is like really a learning process listening to everybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
I just want to say really quick, with bringing up Chelsea Leland, one of the mothers, and I can't remember the son's name, but he was having over 100 seizures. Billy, thank you. And the government literally took the medicine away and said she could no longer give cannabis. And she said, I'd rather watch my son live illegally than watch him die legally. And that is what we're facing today, and we need to change it.
Yeah. So we've got about time for 2 or 3 questions. So if there are any, Rico, I'll let you set it up. Should I bring you the mic? Yeah, I can do that.
What's up, everybody? My name is Rico. I run Baker Technologies, Corolla, California. First off, I want to thank all of you guys on the panel coming out from Los Angeles. You know, it's very, very, very refreshing to hear you guys talk about social equity from the jump. My organization, National Diversity and Inclusion in Cannabis Alliance, that's our goal, to bridge the gap, the economic and the educational gap between the black and brown communities and the white communities. I was speaking with a couple of people this evening.
Really quick, I'm just glad you said black, brown, and white, because a lot of the dialogue is black and white, and I think we need to change. We got to just change the way we talk, or else we're going to just be repeating history.
100%. So between the 3-strike law and the illegal war on drugs, we've lost 3 generations of black and brown men. It's real, right? So I really, really appreciate you guys leading off the conversation with that. Just want to say how refreshing it is, especially. Will's the only white guy up there.
We got a token.
No, but in reality, we've had legal weed in some form in California for 22 years, and we don't have that shit. So that's how real the shit is. It's like real for me to come out here and see that. All right, and so just want to thank you guys for that. And also, I was speaking with a couple of people tonight. So California, we're kind of like in our terrible twos in the industry. You guys are still in the womb. You guys are still kicking in the womb. So what is your plan to make sure that some of these ideas that you have get put into legislation? Because I go to every city hall meeting, I go to all these rallies, I organize a lot of stuff through our company Baker, but it's tough. How are you guys going to get through to the communities of color when we've had the rugs pulled out from underneath of us? All right, so big thing, Lola, in California, real quick, LA is not the second largest city in the nation. It's 92 cities smashed together.
Yeah.
So what's crazy is, the Chronic, the album Dr. Dre, right? Compton did not pass legalization. They're missing out on the economic boom. How are you guys going to help out those communities?
So, in New York, there's a group of different organizations that all work together for legalization, and one of the main organizations is Drug Policy Alliance, and they have been instrumental in this. So it is.